Hello and welcome to the Psinys Paranormal Talk Radio Show. I'm your host Patrick. This is our premiere show, and we'll be discussing tonight a little bit about what we do, what our group is about. We'll also be discussing, to those who are not familiar with the paranormal, we'll be explaining what exactly a ghost is. And we'll also be touching upon the subject on how to investigate the paranormal scientifically. First, to start off with, we're going to talk about the PSINYS's mission, which is our group. Paranormal Scientific Investigation of New York State is a scientific-based research group. The group was formed for the research and study of anomalous activities. Our goal is to create equipment that will enable us to break down the difference between scientific fact versus soft science. This equipment will allow us to study the paranormal activity on a quantum level. By gathering scientific data with this equipment that is already in use by quantum physics and mechanics and the equipment that we intend to build, we intend to breach the barrier between the living and the dead, proving once and for all that the soft science of the paranormal is a true hard science. I have been investigating anomalous activity for over 40 years. The past 10 years I have spent an unlimited amount of time on the research and study of these anomalies. About 4 years ago I decided to put together a team and a group known as the PSINYS, totally dedicated for that purpose of the study of anomalous activities. My team and I take a scientific approach to the study of unknown phenomenon. Our work is a serious study of paranormal, consisting of heavy research on whatever we investigate, be it a home, a church, a historic area, or a cemetery. We believe that there is life after death. And we also believe that some who die remain here because they're either left with unfinished business, having a strong link to their lives that they had here on earth, or that they were taken suddenly due to murder, accidental causes, or natural disasters. We also know that there's more than our simple lives here upon this earth. There is a world, yet another dimension, or even several dimensions, as science has already proved. One without time, without pain, without suffering. One that has no limits, as we have here on this earth. A world where our consciousness, our soul, our energy lives on. And as you know, energy cannot be destroyed, and we are made up of energy. It is my goal and my dream, as is my team's, to one day prove by using science and technology that a doorway to that world will be open. Over the years I've been working on a project that I hope to one day complete, and it will do just that. As I continue to search for funding for my project, we will in the meantime gather high-tech evidence, still work on new equipment, and continue our investigations so that one day we will be able to show the world that this is a science. Just like 80 years or so ago, when man looked toward the night sky and the moon and talked about leaving this planet and going there, it was thought by many as crazy or science fiction. Yet today we've done both. I believe that we can show the world that there is a place when we leave our bodies that we go and live on. Okay, our next topic. What is a ghost? If we are to perform serious scientific research in this field of the paranormal, then we must level the playfield concerning what it is that we are stalking. So exactly what is a ghost anyway? Well, if you ask this question among those who participate in the paranormal community, you'll get a mixed reply. So, a ghost or a spirit or apparition is the energy, soul, or personality of a person who has died and has somehow gotten stuck between this plane of existence and the next. Most researchers believe that these spirits do not know that they're dead. Very often they have died under traumatic circumstances, unusually or highly emotional circumstances. Ghosts can be perceived by the living in a number of ways. Through sight, which we call apparition, sound, which we call the use of EVPs, smell, fragrances, odors, perfume, sometimes cigar, pipe smoke of our loved ones, or the place where the person, the apparition was or is. And sometimes it can just be sensed. Our belief is that the intelligence and the emotions that made up who we were in this life survives the death process. The energy may be considered our souls, energy that can't be destroyed by death, but is transformed into another configuration. This energy is detectable with EMF meters that measure milligal units. Since we can measure the physical energy emitted by these entities, we know that ghosts are not figments of our imagination, as some skeptics would suggest. There are many sites that attempt to define ghosts. From our perspective, however, they all have one major flaw. They are metaphysical opinions of a source for a specific phenomenon rooted in folklore, with no scientific supported evidence to enrich their definition with truth. In other words, scientifically, there's no such things as ghosts by this definition. So, let's redefine what we are researching. A ghost is a term applied to a non-ordinary phenomenon that manifests itself into the physical dimension upon which we exist without appreciable physical properties, but which leaves markers in the environment that cannot be readily explained. So we are charged with a task of further defining this phenomena that we have labeled the ghost. In order to do this, we must understand everything that is going on surrounding the event. The occurrences encountered are many. The types of activities are varied. We may have strange clouds that appear in our photographs. We may read anomalous energy from various parts of the spectrum. We may even record what appears to be human voices. But all the evidence is lacking a common thread to tie them all up together in a neat little bundle. So far, this has eluded us. Because the phenomenon is so transitory and varied, constant monitoring of the environment and a collection of uninterrupted continuous data will be required to find the answer. We must do this, trace back all effects to a source, In order to do this, we must look beyond the actual effect to try to discover the source. This will require using fixed sensor data logger devices monitored by computer. It will require searching for the source using handheld localized detection instrumentation. We must measure things that we haven't thought to measure and document these things across a wide variety of places and conditions. Only then will the source begin to materialize. It may well be that everything we have encountered has a scientific and natural explanation, or it may be that we have evidence of life beyond death. It may be that life after death is a scientific or natural explanation. And only discovering the source of the effect will tell us the answer. And it is this that we must hunt impeccably. And these things are real phantoms that we are seeking, and in a very real sense, ghosts. This is what our team painstakingly does to gather evidence, documentation, readings of the environment and the conditions surrounding the phenomena and activity. And I'm sure that there are teams out there who do the same thing, who take a serious approach to the research of anomalous activities in the paranormal. Okay, I'm going to discuss next how to investigate the paranormal scientifically. Well, there's a vast majority of investigative groups around the world that rely on friends or fellow believers. Many claiming to be sensitives, base their conclusions on personal experiences. Others consider themselves scientific or technical because they use digital equipment, cameras, audio recording and collection devices to gather evidence. And based on these evidence alone, the client might be told that the location is haunted, or perhaps worse, rifled with demonic activity. And there are dozens of articles that are waiting to be written on all these details. But to begin, we need to define what a scientific investigation means. Okay, the core consideration in this case is investigation. Never mind about the scientific part. If the basic principles of investigation are forgotten or ignored, and it doesn't matter what the philosophical approach happens to be. Paranormal investigators are supposed to conduct investigations, so they better have the essentials in mind before stepping out the door. So before they can be any decision of science or paranormal, there needs to be a decision on the good investigative practices. First and foremost, the investigator must begin with the understanding that the investigator is a person who has come onto the scene, walking into the aftermath of some unknown event or experience, one of which may still be ongoing, or you cannot come to any meaningful conclusions without defining the perimeters. That means documenting. And there will be a victim or victims, those who have experienced something profound enough to lead them to request an investigation and to have investigators walk through the door. So witness interviews are incredibly important. Not only do we have to dig into the details of the experience, but we also have to define the perimeters where it happened, when it happened, who was present, if this has happened before, and so on. The information should be gathered well ahead of time, and if possible, the location where the event took place should also be documented history and year and age of the building and everything else going on in the surrounding area as well. It's all about context. The investigator has to understand on a basic level what happened and who was involved. It should be remembered that the event, no matter how active, must be considered an effect to be understood. Nothing happens without a cause, and the vast majority of the time, the cause is incredibly mundane. The perception of the witnesses or witness must be examined to determine if it is reliable. Questions should be asked regarding unusual changes at the location and not otherworldly changes, but rather something that might coincide with the event in a near perfect detail. The investigator has to put himself or herself into the shoes of the victims and understand their perspective well enough to consider why they've experienced an event in the manner that they did. If this sounds repetitious, that's because it is. Any investigation means digging deep beneath the surface explanation of things and getting closer to the truth, regardless what that truth may be. Some groups call this debunking. This is not quite correct. Debunking assumes the invalidity of an event, which is not exactly the concept at play. Even so, the hearts are often in the right place. Investigation is simply a collection of information toward the goal of reaching a definable conclusion. If the collection of information is incomplete, the conclusion is harder to define. Taken another way, if little or no context exists for an effect, and how can someone claim to define the cause? Well, for the same reason one cannot conduct an investigation with the preconceived notions. This is not as simple as it sounds. A homicide detective obviously walks into a crime scene knowing that a death has occurred. However, they don't immediately assume it's a homicide. They need to build a case. For that case, from the information available. And they certainly can't walk into the scene thinking that the butler did it. So, in a sense, we have to approach this similar to what a detective would approach a homicide case, or any case, basically. The point I was trying to make is relatively simple. Knowing how to conduct a basic investigation of anything should be the core of any paranormal investigator's personal arsenal. It goes without saying that professional experience with investigations would be an asset. Law enforcement agents, for example, would have the skill set necessary, but clinical psychologists also know how to chase down details and information under the right conditions. Another strong source of investigative experts would come out of scientific research or engineering departments, where identifying unknown sources of validation are a daily exercise. It would seem obvious that any group designed around the notion of scientific investigation of reported paranormal activity should consist of scientists and engineers. However, this is not precisely what the term means. One does not have to possess a scientific degree to conduct a scientific investigation. In this case, scientific is more about the mode of thinking, a process of considering information, than it is about technical research. A group can conduct a scientific investigation without devolving into highly technical equipment types. All it takes is the ability to eliminate subjective bias and consider information with an objective eye. As simple as it sounds, it is in fact one of the most difficult aspects of a paranormal investigation. The decision to investigate the paranormal typically implies a belief in the paranormal, a willingness to accept paranormal explanations for unusual circumstances. Unfortunately, this can undermine any attempt to drill down into the truth of a situation if an investigator is unwilling to stop where his personal preferences take hold. However, there are plenty of religious scientists in the world happily believing in the divine without letting those beliefs get in the way of an objective analysis. They do not simply declare that a chemical reaction occurs because of the Holy Spirit made it so. They attempt to identify, understand the mechanism of the reaction. So the common way to approach such a problem is called scientific or critical thinking. Critical thinking is something that any investigator can apply toward any situation. That type of thinking is consecutively applied in the scientific field, especially with one attempting to identify an unknown. Now, since paranormal investigation is about identifying or simply observing the unknown, the applicability of critical thinking is fairly obvious. First and foremost, the investigator must walk into the situation with an open mind. Now, this does not mean that he should be ready to accept a paranormal explanation. It simply means that they should be ready to accept any explanation, mundane or otherwise. Instead of looking for signs of possession, they should begin with the basic principles of investigation maintained first and foremost. Once the context of the reported paranormal event is documented and studied, the investigators can begin to apply critical thinking to the situation. The specific content of the reported activity will be vitally important. The goal is to apply the concept of process of elimination. For example, we can consider the situation where a client mentions that every so often, seemingly at random, a door on the right side of the end of a long hallway will close on its own. The building is perhaps 100 years old and has not been upgraded much over the years. Others have mentioned that the door seems to close more often during the day than at night, but the details are sketchy. Assuming the initial investigation produced no reason for the question to question the honesty of the client, how would critical thinking be applied to this situation? One would presume study the door and determine what kind of force and in what direction would need to be applied to close the door under normal circumstances. If you don't know what the explanation needs to cover in terms of behavior or activity, then it is impossible to draw the proper conclusion. Perhaps it is noted that the door swings into the room on a slight slant away from the hall, so that it would naturally rest against the wall and not the frame. This eliminates gravity, which other focus might be applied to the door to make it close. Air current could be a possible explanation, After all, the door closes more during the day, and perhaps the client keeps the windows open in the room until after sundown. But what if the room has no windows? Could one open window in the hall create enough force to draw or to pull the door closed against the pull of gravity? This process of elimination is the key to ongoing investigation. The most obvious explanation should be considered first. In the case of the door, a hypothetical statement could be made going into the first step of this process. Gravity causes the door to close because the setting on the house placed on the frame, which is on a slight slant toward the hill. Then it's a matter of testing the hypothetical explanation. In the case of the example, the explanation was determined to be false. A new hypothetical explanation had to be considered and tested. Of course, what if gravity had caused the door to close? Would that have been enough to put matters at rest? For some, yes, it might have. However, the true conclusion is that gravity can cause the door to open and close, but other causes may exist. This is because of a basic scientific principle. No amount of evidence can prove a hypothesis. It takes only one experiment to prove the hypothesis wrong. An example is only as good as the data surrounding it. So, taking into account, the investigator should test the possibility that gravity is not the only cause for the movement of the door. It would not be difficult to do so either at that point. For example, the investigator could prop the door open with a door stop and observe whether or not the door still manages to close. If not, then the data suggests that gravity would have been the root cause. If the door still closes on its own, then the hypothesis is wrong, and a new explanation must be developed and challenged. This is called scientific method. It is all in the heart of the scientific methodology. To conduct a scientific investigation of reported paranormal activity, the principles of critical thinking and the scientific methods should be applied. This will never disprove the possibility of spiritual activity, but it will provide data suggesting that a mundane explanation is far more likely if the investigator could build an experiment around the client's story. Of course, not every situation is straightforward. Sometimes paranormal activity is too vain, or the kind of activity that cannot be tested so easy. It might be necessary to gather more information, even in the case of a simple experiment model, like the example of a moving door. Each and every step needs to be observed to ensure that the conditions of the tests are understood and that the results are verifiable. So observation, documentation, experiments, data logging is so vital to any scientific investigation of the paranormal that it needs to be done. And then and only then can you say you've conducted a scientific investigation. So there you have it, folks. I hope that that explained a little bit about the unexplained phenomenon and field of the paranormal and scientific research that can be done and is being done by our group and I'm sure other groups. Our group also has, besides the researchers and the investigators, we also have 5 psychics and mediums combination. Now there is a difference between a psychic and a medium, which we will get into in future shows. For those of you who are not aware of that are unexplained, we'd be more than happy to hear from you. You will be able to call in, as I say, to our show. We will have a wide variety of topics that we'll discuss in the future here. We hope you enjoyed tonight's show. We will also be setting up interviews with our psychics and mediums to be on our show. We also are hoping that the public will call in to discuss with us their experiences, questions if you have any about the unexplained or the paranormal. If you have any paranormal activity of your own that you wish to have investigated, of course you can go to our website. Our website is www.psinys.com. There you will find a little bit about us, and you will be able to hit the contact button, which will go directly to my email from the site, and I will get back to anyone as soon as possible. We're also announcing that if you'd like to be a guest on our upcoming shows, that you do the same. Go to our website, again, www.psinys.com, and hit the contact button. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what your interests are, what your topic would be in discussion, and we will put you on the show. We will set up a time for you. So we hope you enjoyed tonight's show. Again, if you did, you can go to our website, www.psinys.com. There you will find a link to our Facebook page, where you can hit like, leave comments. You will also find a link to Twitter, and you will also see this broadcast that's on here will be on our website page. We'll be putting future radio casts on the website. There'll be a special page made just for that. Future shows, by the way, will be with guests, including psychics from our group and other psychic mediums out there who would like to call in or will call in. We'll have interviews with them. We also hope to have interviews with some of our people from the science and engineering field. We'll also be discussing other topics such as UFOs, which is, I know, a very great topic. We also do UFO investigations, and I've done, I'd say, about 600 or so since I've been doing the paranormal research as well. We'll also have shows on near-death experiences, where you can call in and discuss that with us. We'll have shows on Bigfoot, things to do with cryptozoology, missing time, government conspiracies. So we're going to have a wide range of shows for you in the upcoming future. We hope to have this running on a nightly basis, 7 days per week. We will have and are looking forward to having a lot of exciting and interesting topics to share with you and to hear from you. Again, thank you for listening to tonight's show. Feel free to go to our website, www.psinys.com, and There you'll find links to our Facebook and to Twitter. Our show is broadcast over Blog Talk Radio. You can find us there at www.blogtalkradio/PSINYS/64908. There you will find the PSINYS Paranormal Talk Radio show. Again, thank you for listening. We hope that you'll keep following us and continue to listen. I'm your host, Patrick, saying good night.